Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the NSCAC Presents Behind the Bench. Today, our topic of discussions is grassroots soccer, where future stars get started, fundamental soccer. With me, we have Karl Dewazien, who's a former director of coaching for California Soccer. Karl, good morning. How are you?
I am terrific now that I can hear you without an echo.
Perfect. And with us as well, we have Jason Blake, who's the technical director of Central Alberta Soccer Association. Jason, good afternoon. How are you today?
Hi, Valerio. I feel much better that I'm not going to come on and sing a song to keep the crowd entertained.
We were worried for a while that you were going to have to do this solo just to get it up in the air.
I'll give it a go.
So today our discussion, guys, is grassroots soccer. It's any boy or girl wanting to play soccer that's 12 years or younger, and I think one of the key words we're using is fundamental. And I think at this age, I know with our academy, our main focus is to make sure that the player is having fun each and every session, and is dragging or demanding the parent to bring the player to the next practice, and that to us is what we rate our success at that age, is making sure that they're coming back every week or every session, and they're leaving with a smile on their face. Karl, what are your thoughts on grassroots soccer and keeping it fun for those players at that level?
Well, make it quite simple. All you need to do is ask yourself, what do players come to practice for? And it's actually inside of their name, isn't it? They come to play. They don't come to be listened to, run laps, and all the other things that we as adults do to them. They come to play. And when the children play, in most cases, they don't want to finish playing unless an adult interferes. And so I would say, and this is my motto when I start a practice with the younger age group, is if the ball is moving and the players are moving, some learning is taking place. If the ball stops moving and the players stop moving, learning stops.
Jason, your thoughts?
I think Cole said some of the most important things that are essential with young players, male or female, enjoying the game, and I think that's play the game. But Cole did also mention one really important word, and that was keep it simple. The simple aspect of it. The game is a simple game, and coaches can overcomplicate it, and I think that takes a lot of the fun and enjoyment out of it for the players. So I just, excuse the pun, but I echo what Cole says.
I agree. I think sometimes we as coaches want to just hear ourselves talk and ramble, and we have to take a step back and put ourselves into the players' mindset and say and realize that they didn't come here to listen to us. They came here to play, enjoy, have fun, and go home.
That's the bottom line. The unfortunate part is that we adults, we start using words, and I'd like to use a word that I use inside of my practice session, and it's called fundamental soccer 9-step routine. Now, the reason that I mention the word routine is because everybody thinks that as soon as we apply a routine, it becomes boring. Well, it becomes boring for the adult. The children, if they're playing and if they're active, they can't get bored. The adult gets bored because of one reason: they're not active. So we become active by observing the child, and the very first thing that we want to do is help them out, and we're constantly talking. Anytime that you're talking, you're interfering with them playing. So, and as a matter of fact, yesterday, and I'd like to read this to you, because I was always criticized for using the word routine, and yesterday was the first time I had somebody that actually supported my stance, and his name is Todd Bean, who's the founder of the Tobo Institute. If you checked his article yesterday, it was Eliminate Mediocrity. And he says, these are the two lines I'd like to read to you. If I wanted to perpetuate mediocrity, let me tell you what I would do at the training session. Number one, I would avoid establishing engaging routines. If you want to nurture excellence, we must abandon mediocrity. Number one, establish an engaging routine. In other words, you need the children to know what to expect. Once they understand what to expect, then you can teach them. And I came up with 9 steps, and hopefully we can cover those in a little while. but it has to be a routine because we are creatures of habit. And all I need to do is just ask you, if we change that routine, what happens to you? For example, tonight, I'd like for you to go with your spouse and trade where you go to bed and get up tomorrow morning on the other side. See how you feel about that upcoming day.
No, I think you make a lot of interesting points, Karl. I think you know, based on my experience, I see when we change the routine of a child at that age, you almost throw off their whole entire day. And sometimes, you know, you see a player from Monday to Friday, and they're fantastic at training session because there's a routine. They wake up in the morning, they go to school, they come home, they do some homework, they have dinner, and they come to training. Then comes Saturday and Sunday, and the routine has changed, right? Maybe they've stayed up a little bit later on Friday. Maybe they went to bed, they woke up a little bit later on the Saturday or the Sunday, and then you notice that the performance in whatever we're doing on Saturday, Sunday has changed. And I think it's important to keep that routine as consistent as you can, so that the child could perform at whatever they're doing.
Well, if you want me to add a little bit to it, all you need to do is take good school districts. And I think it has to go also back to the clubs. If you have a good school district, they have a routine, which means that the classes are always the same, from kindergarten all the way to at least 8th grade, not necessarily in high school, but you maybe have reading, writing, arithmetic, and art. If you go from kindergarten all the way to the 8th grade, they'll keep that routine. And it should be the same, I think, with clubs who the terminology or the way that you run your practice session with your 18-year-olds, it should be the same with the 4- and 5-year-old. The only difference is the way that you approach the children. Under 10s and younger, you need to be very patient. 10 to maybe 14, you have to be persistent because you need a lot of routine to make it sink in. And then with the older ones, obviously it's psychology, because if they've stuck around long enough with the abuse that we run them through, then they're tough soccer players. Anyway, U10s and younger, patience. Why? Because they need to learn to love to play this game. If they don't love it, then you can't do the routines later on during the 10 to 14 age group, because here's when you do the persistent things of repetition, doing things over and over until it's instilled. So just a few more thoughts.
Yeah, I attended it's funny you say that, Karl, how important it is at 8, 9, and 10, because I attended my Ontario Soccer Technical Director Diploma, and they brought that up. They said that out of 10, so if you have a team of 10 players, a U8, by the time they get to U10, 7 out of those 10 players have quit the game of soccer. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge number. So, you know, having that in mind, Jason, and you're the technical director of Alberta, what would be some of the things you would put in at that age to make sure that we're not losing 7 out of 10 players in 2 years?
Yeah, Valerio, it's a great question. I've been in Canada 2 years now, and I spent most of that time just listening and observing. And a couple of real big things that I think, and it goes back to Karl's point about playing the game. Roster sizes really, I struggle sometimes. I see games where there's more players off the field than are on the field, you know, and it goes back to what Cole said. We have to cultivate a love of the game. And if young players aren't playing the game, how can they love the game? So for me, that's a really big concern, you know, and I appreciate the challenges of you know, kind of funding and that side of things. And obviously the more players we have on a roster, the more subscriptions and so on. I understand that. But for me, the most important thing is the children and them playing. And if they're not playing the game, then I think the adults, the leadership, the custodians of the game at this current time, I think we have to look at ourselves and say, how do we adapt it? We have some quite rigid structures of competition and tournaments and tiering. And I get asked more by parents, what tier is your club, than what are the benefits for my child. And I think we have to rewrite that narrative. I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of education. Karl mentioned before we come on about supporting parents and helping parents understand how they can really help support the environment of fun for the child in soccer. And I think that's a really important thing. And then Karl mentioned it as well, you know, about the kind of the older age game, whether that's the adult game or whether we're looking at kind of 17s and above. And I think sometimes we can grab a sexy article on social media about what Pep Guardiola does, or, you know, what a top, you know, Nagelsmann in Germany does. And suddenly we're seeing adult training put in with under nines. And it's like, hang on a minute, you can't just take a session plan off of the internet and just replicate it. It comes back to who are your players, what's their age appropriate characteristics, and who are they? Who are those little humans? What are their needs? You know, you can't just drag and drop. And I see that quite often. And, you know, it's great that we're watching the elite game as coaches, but we can't just then take that and put that into an under nines environment. So I think that's a danger. We see a lot of content on different social media channels now, and I think that can be dangerous. And then the last one would be qualifications. I think some basic coaching fundamentals are not achieved, and that's, we'll see maybe 12 under eights on a huge field with one ball with huge goals, and they're told to go and play. And it's, you know, understanding how the field dimensions and the conditions on any game impacts the outcomes has to be understood, because that's now just becoming a big running game. Probably one player's dribbling the ball from one end to the other. All the other children, if they're actually engaged in it, are just chasing. And there's probably 4 or 5 that you know, it's not really fun for them, so they're not really interactive. So understanding without getting too technical, the construct of session design, of how best to bring the game to the players. I've seen some really funky things. I've seen it looks like Willy Wonka's chocolate shop sometimes, and I'm like, I you know, just let the kids play 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, whatever, and let them give them a ball each, you know. But yeah, sometimes it's big groups, one ball, big fields, 2 big goals.
Valerio, if you don't mind, I would like to build on what Jason just started on, because what we need is to make sure that the child is successful at what they're doing. And if we start out, you know, attacking, defending, and all these other things that we talk about, the child in a lot of cases can't do it correctly. So now we start instructing. What I believe the very first foundation that we need to do is teach the child, and I'm talking about 4, 5, 6-year-olds, how to lay out their own environment. Okay, so let me just give you a quick example. Valeria, you're on this side, I'm over here. I've got my feet together, and let's say I have 2 objects, doesn't matter what it is. I step over to the right side, I put the object down. I step to the left side, I put the object down. And you take 10 steps away from me and you do the same thing. What have I just built?
You're asking me?
Yes. Your name's Valerio, right?
Today it is, yes. You're building a relationship.
I just laid down cones to the right side, to the left side. I asked you to take 10 steps, and I'm sure a 4-year-old can count to 10. Take 10 steps, turn around, and do the same thing. Put a cone, put a cone. What have I just built?
A grid, a field, a pitch.
Field, a pitch. Okay, so one of the difficult things that I think we do is once the child comes out to practice, and I don't care if it's 6 or 18-year-old, everything's laid out for them. And what are we teaching the child? I know here in the States, what we're teaching them is you can't play soccer unless there's an adult around to lay out your environment. Okay, I've got a 4-year-old granddaughter. Do you know how many times it took me to lay it down, take 10 steps and lay it down? How many times do you think that took?
Not much.
4 tries. After 4 tries, she could lay it out by herself, and guess what we started to do? We started playing one-on-one. Now, if they're successful at laying it out, now you start building on the 1-against-1 game. But you have to do it again, patiently, you have to teach them how that game is played. And maybe we can go into some of those details in a little while if you'd like to. But I think that what we need to do for these children to have fun is teach them how to lay out their own playing environment. With the older players, obviously, you know, let's say the game is, well, let me go through a quick statistic. If you and I are playing against each other, how far apart should those goals be? I already showed you the size, but how far apart should the goals be?
10 steps.
10 steps, or with the older players would be 10 yards. Okay, if we're playing a game of 2 players against 1, how far apart do you think I'm going to make the goals?
10 steps.
I would do it 20 steps. Why? Because the larger team, right? The larger team times 10 yards with the older players. If I'm playing a game of 4-2, how far apart would the goals be?
40 steps.
40 steps. Where does that come from? Adult game. How many players on the team?
11 on each team.
11 on each team. How long is the field? Most official size fields.
Roughly
110 yards.
110 yards.
10 yards per player. So now if I'm playing a small-sided game, lay it out according to the number of players that you have on the larger team. If it's 1 against 1, it's 10 yards. If it's 5-2, it's 50 yards, et cetera, et cetera. But the players should lay out the field as far as I'm concerned, because it's their responsibility, it's their game, and they should be able to play it away from practice. Our problem in the States is the kids come to 4 practices. That means 4 hours that they train. And around the world, when do the kids play? All day long. As soon as they get a break, they lay out their environment, they start playing. We need to do the same here.
What do you think the difference is, Karl, between the way it's set up in the States and the way it's done in Europe?
Well, the Europeans are now changing it also. If you take a look at it, they are now have academies and everything's laid out for the players. And the better ones of the community are picked up by the clubs. Where are the better players coming from? Africa. Why? Because they are still playing the way that we did in the old days. And we need to recreate that in our practice session as far as I'm concerned.
Just to jump on that with Karl there and to take it another stage further, is a lot of the academies in Europe now are trying to recreate street soccer, that kind of no adult intervention environment where the players take responsibility for their own environment, whatever that looks like, however they want it to look like. And speaking to a few contacts I have in the UK, you know, their clubs are very much, particularly in what they call the foundation phase, 11s and below, they're just trying to take the adult intervention out of it. Some clubs like Manchester United have been doing it for years. Other clubs are now trying to recreate that kind of environment as well in the academy structure. It's not an easy piece, but they're trying. So the academies now have identified that maybe they're too structured and it's too formalized for the players, and they want to take that back again. So what that looks like in 3 years will be very interesting. But yeah, Karl's absolutely right, and the clubs have identified that perhaps they've gone too far down one pathway.
Well, Jason, to add to that one, all you need to do is take a look at Germany, right? They were going down in the World Cup play. So what did they do? They built mini fields in every single community so the children could walk to their playing grounds and no adults are around and they're playing. If it's one-on-one, whatever the numbers would be, they did that. We don't have that luxury. I know here in the States, we don't have mini fields anywhere. And I don't understand why we don't take basketball courts, for example, and make them mini futsal courts. Or why we don't make mini fields, you know, where the kids can lay it out. Or like here in California, we've got backyards, lots of grass. And what do? They play beat with their computers because the coach made them dependent on, you can't play unless you come to practice.
Yeah, and I think, Karl, to add to that point, I think a lot of it is who's in charge of the group and what are you expecting from your players, right? So some coaches will promote, guys, go out, play with your friends, get out and do as much as you can on your own. And some will promote that you can only do things when I'm around or someone on our staff is around. And I think that if you take a step back and look at the child, how they react to when you give them a little bit of independence and a little bit of ownership, as to oppose when you're directing it. There's a big change in their body language, their demeanor, and even the smile on their face that, I did this, I set this up, look how amazing this is, right? And we've done a little bit of that on our virtual, where we're now every Thursday the players are picking the activities and they're running the Zoom sessions, and I'm just there watching and supporting. And there's a real sense of pride on Thursdays of they're going to be the coach and they're going to walk through everybody with the drill. And I think we need to do a lot more of that.
Boy, Valerio, I'm so sorry that I just panicked, because as soon as I hear the word drill, I start having difficult time, because to me, children come to us to play, but they come to play games. So anything that you do with these kids, make sure that you're telling them that they're playing a game. I've taken coaching courses where I took the same exercise or activity, had one group, and we told them that you're going to be doing a drill versus one that's playing the game. Which one do you think lasted longer? Or which one do you think quit the soonest? Or which one do you think lost interest?
The game, because you can once you introduce the component of competition, the activity becomes even more enticing to the player.
But if you were told, I'm going to ask you do you want to do a drill or would you like to play a game? Same activity, which one would you choose?
The game.
Of course. And here we tell players, all right, let's do the next drill instead of let's do the next game. Please don't use the word drill anymore.
No problem.
Sorry.
Karl, you wanted to talk a little bit about your 9 steps?
Okay, I'll go through them very quickly, but I'd like to get back to the last one that we just finished talking about. I think it's very important to also include the parents on laying out the environment. If you teach the child should then teach the parent, or vice versa. If you teach the parent, then they should be teaching the child at home, so that they can play mom and dad kind of thing. But now you need to make sure that the father doesn't hang on to the ball all the time, because the child should be touching. Let me go very quickly through the 9 steps. Step number 1 is start the practice. Step 2 is warm up. Step 3 is 1 + 1. Step 4 is 1 versus 1. Step 5 is halftime. Step 6 is small-sided games. Step 7 is scrimmage. Step 8 is cool down. And step 9 is end practice. If you go through that terminology, almost every practice or anybody that runs a practice does most of these things to begin with. We start the game practice, correct? And we end practices. We understand that terminology. How many of you use the term of warm up and cool down? You've heard of those, right? You've heard of breaks and you've heard of scrimmage. So the only ones that are a little bit different are the 1 + 1 and small-sided games. That's only 2 that are out of the sequence that people don't understand. So do you want me to go very quickly through the 9 steps?
Absolutely.
Okay, step number 1, start practice. The coach needs to understand that it's rehearsal. For me, it's rehearsal for the game on Saturday. So if the game starts at 10 o'clock and you want the players to show up at 9:30, do the same for practice. When the players come to practice, what I think they should be doing is check their homework assignment. And one of the homework assignments might be play 1 versus 1 games. Let me know the score against your mom, against your dad, against your sibling. Once the practice starts, the greeting and handshakes and all of those happen before practice. Once practice starts, the coach needs to make sure that the players understand that he now becomes the person who's in charge, while the players are the ones become players. So it's from a child to a player, from a dad, mom and dad, or whatever they are. Now they become the coach. It's like a classroom, right? You're a student. At recess, you're one individual. Once you go into the classroom, you become a different individual. So we start with discipline. start the practice. The warm-up to me is every player has a ball. You put them inside of the fundamental square, and now they're working individually on the technique that you're trying to teach. And let's say, for example, that you're working on around the world while you need a demonstration explanation at the beginning of practice so the kids know what you're going to focus on. And it tells the coach what not to make comments on, because every time we see a player make a mistake, we stop practice. Am I making sense so far?
Absolutely.
Okay, so now in the fundamental square, the child uses their imagination as if they're using the movement against an opponent. Okay, then we go to the 1+1. Okay, this sign in math, what does it mean? This sign in math. Jason, I'll ask you the question. This sign in math, what does it mean?
Addition.
Okay, so the coach now is going to add information. Okay, let's say that we're running a practice session right now, and all I say as you're out there, I'm the coach, you're the player, Jason, and obviously you're a little distance away from me, so I have to raise my voice. And all I say is, Jason, what's your mental response?
I pay attention. I'm connected to whoever called my name.
Okay, so you stop, you look and listen, because that's what you've been taught, right? But what's going through your mind?
What have I done?
What have you done what?
Wrong.
Okay, do you think that you're open for information now?
Probably a little bit kind of on the back foot, really.
Think about it. Yeah. Here we've got, I'm your dad, I might be a teacher, I'm your friend, I'm all of these positive things, and I'm trying to teach you something, and all I say is the nicest word that you'll hear is your name. And you're going, what did I do wrong? We're not opening up the child to receive information. Okay, let me go into an older age group, and Valerio, we're out there, we're playing a game, right? You're playing a game, and all I say is, Jason, what's your response?
What have I done wrong?
No, I called out Jason, I didn't call you.
What has he done wrong?
Exactly. So now, not only are we got a problem with Jason not listening, but now we've got peer group pressure going, oh, there he goes again, he screwed up. The 1+1, PLUS, players learn using stoppages. We need to teach the children or the players, even in the older age group, that during this time, we're going to stop play, we're going to do cooperative activities or games, and when I stop you from playing, everybody's going to be happy. So both of you are going to do this for me right now. I'm going to say the word Jason, and I want both of you to hit your chest, give me the peace sign, and smile. You ready, Jason?
I'm ready.
Okay. Obviously, I was expecting, you guys are FIFA licensed coaches, you would do it right away. Look at the time it took, right? It takes time. You have to be patient for them to learn. So Jason, what did I expect you to do?
You expected me
to. And you still didn't do it. I just finished saying, Jason, look at Valerius having a good time in the background now. Okay. Yeah. If I now am talking about cooperative play, and the children won't know what cooperation means. It means that we work together. During this time, you have to tell them over and over and over and over again, we're now playing a plus game, 1+1. You're going to cooperate with the coach. So when I say, Jason, what are you going to do? Valerio, you don't have to do it anymore. I'm just working with Jason.
I just don't want to get yelled at again. Karl, sorry to interrupt for a second, because these are great teaching techniques. How can we educate coaches and parents to understand that this is going to be our way of teaching, to allow the player to become, to enjoy the session or the activity that we're going to be doing? Because I think it's fantastic, and I'm even learning something right now. But it's not about me learning it and going to do it. We've got coaches that are in charge of a group of players. What would be your suggestion to coaching courses on, or what does a coach need to do in order to understand this, because I think you make a great point. If you call someone's name and everybody's got to do something silly, then there's then as soon as someone hears someone's name, there's not that intention of what did that person do wrong. There's no negative reaction to that.
Okay, you have to go back to what I mentioned a long time earlier, and that is that everybody in your league, in your club, should be using the same terminology. Okay, so the method that I'm trying to explain to you is you have coaching courses and you evaluate the coaches before they start working with the team. And as they're doing their practice sessions, make sure that they're doing it your way, because the kid from 6 is going to 8 to 10 to 12. They should be facing the same kind of a situation with different pressures in the future. But if you don't have that particular, you know, we add, subtract, we multiply and divide, if you don't do that in the sequence, if the player goes from one coach to another one and it's always different terminology, you're starting the whole season over again and the kids get confused, and that's why they quit when they become teenagers. Okay, your league has to use the same. It's called coaching courses and mandate it. You want to be part of our club or what, you know, a league. This is the curriculum. This is the way we want you to teach your code, work with your players. But let me go on for a second so that we get this point across, because you want the coach to teach the players that there will be stoppages and we're going to cooperate. So now we need success again. Success means that the coach tells the opposing player, let's say that I'm working on a particular move, tells the opposing player that what you're going to be doing for this individual who's just getting started, you're going to be stationary. So we have the opponent, but we need success for the child to work on that dribbling move. Okay? As the child gets better, what is the opponent going to do? Well, you're going to either start walking, maybe jogging, or eventually you might go at game speed, but we're cooperating together. I may tell the opposing player that you're too far away from me when I'm doing the dribbling move. So in other words, the players cooperate with each other. But if there's any stoppages whatsoever, everybody's going to be happy because the coach is here to improve us. Does that make sense? You want the adult to help out, but you also want the players to help each other out. Okay, so we go from the 1+1, players learn using stoppages, to the next phase, because now I've taught the players what I expect during this practice. The next game then is 1 vs 1, 1 versus 1. Jason, what does VS stand for?
I'm not sure I can use that terminology. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure I can use that terminology on a live webinar. Help me out, Karl.
All right. It's a trick question, by the way. Valerio, what does VS stand for? 1 versus 1.
I'm going to take Jason's lead and not comment.
All right. You know that 1 versus 1 means that you and I are going to compete against each other, right? So we just finished teaching, but I need to find out through testing if the players are learning how to do the move or the technique or the tactic correctly. So we teach in the cooperative. Now we go into the competitive. And we know that competition, 1 versus 1, means the players are going to compete. But the VS, what does it stand for the coach? Jason, another trick question. VS for the coach in the 1 versus 1 game.
No, you got me, Karl.
I know I do. This is why we don't teach our kids to have a fun environment, or we don't teach them inside of a fun environment. Because as soon as the children start competing, the VS for the coach stands for verbally silent. You've done your teaching, you did all your talking. Now, anytime the children are competing, the coach should be observing, taking notes, and putting things down, what we're going to do, and try to improve at the next practice. So we always go from a plus game to a versus game, so that the coaches eventually will learn that during practices we go and teach, and then eventually we go to compete. We cooperate and we compete, competition.
In the verses, would you in the verses, would you promote a coach giving positive feedback? So little Johnny did a nice step over. Would you is it okay for a coach to say, Johnny, great
Yeah,
step
no.
over, great imagination? You know what I mean?
Great question. Let's say that you're going to try, you and I are competing against each other. Coach gives you a compliment. What are you going to do mentally? What's going to happen to you?
You're going to want a compliment as well.
Well, I want another compliment, but while you're listening to the coach, what am I doing? I'm going to score on you because your attention now has been drawn away from the competition, from the activity. If I'm drawing your attention away for that split second, I score a goal. Would you be happy with that, even though you got a compliment?
No.
Okay, so anytime they compete, you should never say anything. But if you do say something, and this is probably the most important thing I can tell you, because I hear a lot of coaches, they compliment the players all the time. Great job, that's the way, excellent, and all of that, but they never teach. If you're going to give a compliment, follow that up with a reason that you gave the compliment. So for example, like you just said, if you go, great, Johnny, for doing that step over, there's your teaching moment. Now the other kids can hear that and they know that the coach is looking for a step over move. And this is another thing. I don't use fancy dribbling move names like Cruyff's and Maradona's and all of those kind of things. What I do is I try to teach the dribbling move the move according to the player who has that technique down. So if Johnny does a good step over, it becomes the Johnny. Johnny becomes my instructor for the child who has a difficult time doing the step over. Johnny teaches this child, those two teach the next two, those four teach the next four, and the kids teach each other that move. But it's not a fancy move, it's Johnny's move. And by the end of the season, hopefully you have every child is taught some technique that they teach the other kids, so they all become leaders. And you already said it earlier, children like to teach each other.
Anything to add, Jason?
I think it's very, very good. I'm looking at, in my mind, as Karl's explaining, I'm thinking, so what are the challenges to coaches? And Karl kind of posed the question briefly, or I think you may have, Valerio, about, where the education process. I think we have a responsibility to create a paradigm shift, and Canada, predominantly volunteer coaches don't get paid. So that's tough. That's tough. Real jobs, real lives, families, etc. So how can we make the educational process as accessible as possible? And using the philosophy and the principles from Karl, brilliant. And I'd love to see coaches doing this. We have to, I think, one of the biggest learnings for me, and I'm 21 years being a coach and have the pro license and all that, but this was the biggest learning moment for me. Was about 3 years ago. A colleague of mine is high in kind of the academic world in the UK, and he's written a couple of books on child learning and so on. And we were chatting one day, and he said, "Why do you do that?" And I was like, "Well," and then we were chatting again a bit more, and he's like, "But why do you do that?" And I felt he was being a bit intrusive, and like at first I'm like, "Why are you kind of challenging me on this?" And at the end of the conversation, he explained that everything you do, there's an outcome, there's a ripple effect. And if you don't know why, and I loved when Karl explained at the beginning that 10 yards, 20 yards, 110 yards. If you don't know why you're using an area dimension, then why are you using it? You have to understand why. And understanding all these things that Karl's done, I think we have to get coaches to understand why. So when I see under eights running laps, I want to ask the coach, why? And not, "Oh, well, I haven't got time." No, that's not good enough. Why? What is the outcome? What is the benefit? Where does this fit to your principles and your values? And I'm going to go a bit deep, and sorry about this, but I think the other thing is we have to look at our metrics a little bit. What is success you know, if we're going to say that cultivating a love of the game is what we're driven by to create this brilliant environment for the kids, then what are the metrics to help us achieve that? Now, retention's a huge one, but tournaments and nationals and provincials, that's got to go. Because I think our metrics don't align to creating a love of the game. And I've only been in 2 years, but I've heard more mention of what tier are you playing in? We want to go to provincials. We're going to that tournament. I set up in the area I am, we set up a 4v4 festival weekend where every team was guaranteed the same amount of games. We were only allowing, if it was 4v4, we were only allowing 5 players registered per group. And it was just going to be a fun weekend of everyone playing, no adult intervention. So out of 16 teams, I had 2 teams register. We put a tournament on another time. We had a waiting list. So as the adults, as the guardians of the game, so to speak, the responsibility is on us. And I think we have to look at what because I've seen professional environments where all they do is create the most fun and enjoyable environment for the kids. And if your outcome is to produce professional players, whether it's at your club or elsewhere, they are succeeding. But they never tell the kids they're trying to make them professionals. They're just trying to create the best learning and enjoyable environment where they are. And that's their principle. So whatever as technical directors, as directors of coaching, whoever's kind of the lead figure within the clubs and associations, I think, sitting down and having a real, and the ones that are doing it, brilliant, by the way. I'm not saying no one does it, but I think collectively, I think we have to look at our metrics of what do we gauge success by? And if it's tournaments and we're talking about players getting cut and we're talking about high roster, then we're not cultivating a love of the game. And first of all, like something that happens here in central Alberta is there's many young players and this is a little bit above 12, but we're looking, as we get to about 16, there's players that have nowhere to play because they don't comply to a level of ability that will succeed in a tournament or blah, blah, blah. And then they're encouraged to go and find their own path. And it's like, hang on a minute, that's us, that we're losing, the game's lost. If young players are being chaperoned away from the game, then we've lost. Just a personal belief for me and the club that I'm kind of involved with is we kind of say our principles are love the game, learn the game, live the game. So love the game, absolute non-negotiable. And similar to Cole's principle there is once you love the game, you're actually going to learn the game. Whether you know you're learning it or not, you're going to. And then live the game is hopefully you stay in and around soccer for the rest of your life, whether you stop playing at 35 and then you become a coach, a referee, a club administrator, whoever it might be. There are 3 principles. And I'm gonna shut up on this last one. Probably, and around a lot of coaches, particularly in the academy and the elite, right, everyone wants to know, what book are you reading? And I'm really intrigued by what's in the background of Cole's room there. And I will ask him afterwards, like, what's the one book on that shelf that I should be reading? Best book I ever read that helped me completely revolutionize my thinking was about NFL. And this might be for you, Cole. Bill Walsh, San Francisco 49ers head coach back, I think, in the 80s, maybe early. I'm not quite sure the duration. But the book is The Score Takes Care of Itself. And it's all about process-driven, not outcome-driven. And that was the game changer for me. It was no longer about winning games or what's going to influence, like what's going to get us 3 points. At the end of the day, it was like what we do day to day, how we affect kids, how we create that environment, how we give them that ownership and that entitlement to what they do. And it was no soccer book about the X's and O's or the Pep Guardiola possession. And Pep's brilliant, by the way, not devaluing what he does with his great teams. But what do we do? Cole's 9-point process. What do we do day in, day out that is about the kids? Our principles are, and what do we do about it? And that book was incredible for teaching me that. I'm going to get off my soapbox now and let you talk. Hand the mic back.
I'm glad you mentioned the 49ers because that's my team, even today. But
brilliant book.
I do want to take just one quick pat on the back because what you just finished saying is we honestly, or myself and Bill Thompson, who was the Canadian national staff coach, back in 1980, we eliminated the word tournaments. We tried to get away from those. And in Soccer America, and I've got my headline up there, CYSA North bans tournaments. We were laughed at. Do you know, until about 2017, 37 years later, we finally had the Federation talk about the modified games that Bill and I put together, where the children are on smaller fields with smaller equipment with less opposition. 37 years. So we need to change the culture, and it's one coach at a time as far as I'm concerned.
One at a time, absolutely.
I think coaches play a big part. I think parents play an even bigger part. And I try to tell parents when I have a conversation with parents about this is that it's your child's activity. Support them, but they are doing this because they love what they're doing. And don't put any added pressure on them. Just let them be them, and they'll figure it out. And if soccer is not the activity that they eventually love, they'll find something that they love. But it's your job as parents to support them. And I think, parents and coaches play a big role in just letting kids be kids and just let the game be fun and let everything we do be fun at that age. Karl, did you have?
Valerio, if you don't mind, I'd like to add something that Jason mentioned, and it's the words age appropriate. I am totally opposed to that because I've seen 6-year-olds play better than 16-year-olds. I think it should be ability appropriate. What you do is you adjust the environment according to the player's ability, not according to their age. And that's why if you take a look again at the 9 steps that I had you mentioned earlier, is nowhere in there do I talk about fun games that the children play. They play soccer because we're trying to teach them and we want them to learn how to play soccer. I used to run camps and we played Simon Says, Sharks and Minnows, you name it. We played all those fun games, but there's no World Cup for those games. It doesn't have anything to do with, in most cases, about attacking and defending, so you're not creating any habits. And to me, they should be playing, like I said in the flow chart, it goes from 1+1 to 1 versus 1. Now, every player on the team should play every player on the team. You should play every player on the team. And we're all playing 1 versus 1. So if you have 8 players on the team, there are 4 games going on, 1v1 games. And the coach should be just watching, keeping score, okay? At the end of, let's say that you've got a squad of 18 players, they've played 17 minutes of 1 versus 1. What do you think happens to you physically if you play 1 versus 1 correctly?
Tired.
You're dead tired. Now, we play 1 versus 1, I think, in the youth game incorrectly during practice. Because if a player scores a goal, we stop. We bring the ball back and all. No, they should be able to score from both sides. Score from one side, score from the other side. There should be no boundaries because who are you going to throw it into? I want the players in the 1 versus 1 game to actually run into other games because now they need to make a decision like they have to in the regular game. They're always making decisions as to what do I do next. But they should play against every player on the team because you play one that's weaker so you can practice your technique that you're trying to learn. There's going to be one who's equal to you, who's challenging you, and then you need one who's stronger than you that you can learn from. Because if that player beats you with that movement, let him teach you later on, away from practice. We're all tired, take a break, and now you go to small-sided game. Trick question to either one of you. What's the smallest sided game that you can play?
1v1.
Okay, we already did that in the first half. The first half of practice is 1 versus 1. We do 1+1, 1 versus 1. They're dead tired. We take a break. Now we're going to play a small-sided game.
1 versus 2.
Okay, right away you said versus. That means the kids are going to compete. You always have to start with the plus game.
No.
You have to start with the plus game because you're trying to teach them something. And I'm going to say Jason in the plus game, and Jason's going to do what? See, Jason, God.
I'm done.
Valerio, you're starting. Jason's going to be sitting the bench this week.
You can't be talking like that, Karl.
No, it's a statistic. I'm not going to say those words. It's going to be on paper. I'll show it to you and your parents, right? I show it to you and the parents. This is why you're not starting. But
Karl,
please, 2+1, right? And then what's the next game after 2+1? Trick question.
this is all yours, Jason.
After the 2+1 game, what do you play?
2 versus 1.
Absolutely. You've got to go from the cooperative to the competitive. And so that I don't go into a lot of detail here. But what about the scrimmage? What's the first kind of scrimmage you have to play?
Two v two.
Scrimmage.
2+2.
means the scrimmage. We're finished with the small-sided game. We already did the 2+1, 2 versus 1, and now, you know, the practice has now gone into the scrimmage. That means a whole team, right, is going to practice against either half the squad or against another team. But you have to start with what kind of a scrimmage?
A plus scrimmage.
Yes. You get your A license. You have to start with a teaching scrimmage where you ask the opposing coach, I'm going to stop occasionally. My kids are going to be doing this because I'm trying to get across what we try to teach at the beginning of practice. Let's say it was the step over. Well, we practiced it during the warm-up. We practiced in the 1+1. We checked it in the 1 versus 1. We did it in the 2+1 and into the 2 versus 1, and now we do it in the scrimmage. So you always have a teaching component and then a competitive component.
Karl, there's only one problem with that last description. It's not a step over, it's a Valerio.
Yeah, there you go. Very
Karl,
good. Yes.
Karl, question for you. What are your thoughts on playing a 4+4 or a 4v4 or higher and adding multiple balls?
Okay, first of all, you have to ask yourself, what am I working on? If it's going to be, let's say, for example, passing technique, I don't think I play 4 against 4. Why wouldn't I play 4 against 4, even-sided games? Why wouldn't I play an even-sided game? Would you get, how many passes would you get in the 1+1 or 1 versus 1? How many passes would you get?
None.
Okay, so my thinking is if you're playing even-sided games, then you're not working on the passing technique. So definitely number of goals doesn't matter, but you have to say to yourself, what am I working on? It might be a game of 4-2 with multiple goals. Yes, attack, defend. As long as there is goals to attack and goals to defend, I'm all for it.
Sorry, I didn't mean goals. I meant soccer balls. So let's say we want to play
Same
5.
thing. Same thing. More players. Now, if you're working on even-sided again, you've got lots of soccer balls, how many good passes, I'm talking about good technique, do you think you're going to have with 4 against 4? Right? Players are going to mark each other, and so you may not have the good technique that you want. So I would play maybe 4-1, 4-2, and sure, multiple balls so that we get more passes involved.
And Karl, that goes back to my point earlier about, well, 2 points. One is why? Why would you, and whatever, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's not a confrontational question. It's a why? What are you trying to achieve by doing that with dimensions, balls, whatever? But then this is the problem sometimes is we'll see a session plan online of someone that did this great back-to-back goal game. So I'm going to do it. So then when we ask, why are you doing it? Well, you know, that top coach in California was doing it. It looked great. They said they produced players. It's like, but why? What are the outcomes? What's the purpose? What are you trying to work on? What is it going to encourage within the players? And I like your point there about if we're working on passing, then even number teams, you're probably not going to get the ability to get lots of repetition of passing because effectively two teams. They're going to man mark each other, and so it's going to end up not looking anything like a passing practice. So good, answering that question, why are you doing a 4v2? Well, we're working on passing. We want to encourage success. We want additional options. Like, brilliant, well done. So it just comes back, I think, to being able to answer that question. And the friend of mine in England is always now, his voice is in my head when I'm doing my session designs is, why are you doing that? Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And if I can't answer, then I shouldn't be doing it.
Yes, I agree.
One last question, guys. We have coaches out here. What would be some advice that you would give to coaches out there on how to work with grassroots players and keeping the players engaged and loving the game and having fun? What would be your advice to coaches that are out there?
For me, it's attitude. If you are out there having a great time, or you're actually becoming a child, I think you're going to have a great time with them. If you go out there and you want to win ball games and you're there to win, then I think it's the wrong approach, especially with the little ones. And to just use my motto, I think that the outcome of our children is infinitely more important than the outcome of any game they'll ever play. And what we need for them to want to play is soccer, where they ask to go to practice, they don't want to leave practice, and when they're away from practice, they get their friends or their parents to come out and want to play. The whole idea is, again, they're players and they want to play the game, hopefully.
I'll come kind of two-sided, and Karl, great answer. You've kind of made it difficult for me, but I'll go with it. Absolutely. Put the child in the middle of everything. Your thinking, your planning, your preparation, your delivery. No longer can we go with, well, this is what I did, or I used to run laps when I started myself. Gone. Put those young people in the middle of everything. Make every decision, every action has to be driven to those young people loving the game and having a great experience. And then the second thing I would say is, there's not an expectation, or there shouldn't be an expectation, that you can sit down one night and just scribble down in 5 minutes how all this works. Go and learn from the best. We've got Karl on here, who's got an unbelievable process, very successful by the sounds of it. Reach out to the people that are doing it well. And I'm sure they will be willing to share their experience, their knowledge, their pitfalls. I think we have to learn, what was the challenges? What should I look to avoid? Go and ask the people that are doing it successfully and learn, and then go and do it. But put the kid first. And if you put the kid first, you'll go and make that Zoom call to someone like Karl in California and say, I want to make my kids have the best soccer experience in central Alberta, and I've heard you're the best in California. Can you give me any tips? Reach out. Otherwise, if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll always get the same outcome.
Karl, Jason, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. For those of you that have missed today's program, you can visit our website, www.nscac.ca. If you'd also like to become a member, we're always looking for members, always looking for people to join. We're a great organization, lots of services, lots of good programs out there that we offer. So visit our website, become a member today. Our next Behind the Bench is tomorrow, where we'll be discussing defending principles of play. Karl, Jason, thank you very much. All the best. Stay safe, and we look forward to having you guys on again.
Valerio, if you don't mind, thank you so much. But if they do have questions, they can reach me at my website, 3Ws, fundamentalsoccer.com, and I'd be more than happy to answer their questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Karl.
Thank you.
I can only sign off by going.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.